After 20 years of building together through dust, deadlines, and damn good ideas, Pace and Adam invite you to join them for honest conversations about the home building world. Welcome to Build Connected, where experience meets insight, powered by Diamond Home Restoration.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Build Connected, episode 30, Adam.
Oh, yes. That
On the
is,
fives, we always bring in a guest on the fives, but before we get there, tell me about your weekend. I really want to know.
you surprised me when you asked me this question because I feel like you're just saying that to be nice to me. I
I
don't know.
used to be callous, but now I'm very
You
empathetic.
used to
I
really mean
care.
it when you would say, "How was your weekend?" Now it's like you're just doing it just to do it, and I don't really. Just ask me one more time, so I really feel like you mean it.
Adam, what'd you do over the weekend? What'd you get up to with the
Not,
family?
I didn't do very much. It was pretty boring.
All
It was
right.
a rainy weekend. I blew some leaves for a little bit, but no, not much. Uneventful.
All right.
But
So we've established you're a very exciting guy.
oh, you're
Got it.
cutting me off. You're just cutting me off. Okay,
Yeah.
good enough.
All right. This week we've got another fun guest for you guys. For me, I've been working with our insulation company for 25 years. And we've brought somebody in who deals with all of their building science issues, handles their products and technical side. I think he informs people like us and architects. We've got James Morshead with us today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, guys. It's fun to be here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened before SDI? What were you doing with your life?
That's an interesting question. Well, I've always been in construction, seems like. After college, I did not want to be behind a desk, no tie. Fell into construction, thought it was the coolest thing in the world, dug my heels in, dug into it deeply. Then eventually, without saving in the middle, I ended up studying a bit of physics, chemistry, and got that background. And somehow it magically prepared me for falling into the building science world, which I had never heard of, but is absolutely fun, intriguing, and a never-ending source of education for myself and having fun promoting the ideas of building science.
Funny how
Bringing in
life works
physics.
sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, couldn't have planned it. Could not have planned this.
Nice.
So, James, is there something new in your product line that you foresee coming soon? Something that you're excited about in the insulation world?
Yeah, there's some products bubbling up out there. There's also, along with the products, some awareness changes and whatnot that are pretty significant as well. Products, I've been kind of intrigued with the wood fiber insulation products and where they're going, where they're going to hit on the price point and availability and applications, and will they pass the fire codes? Will they get they're out there. For us, we can't really use them until they're licensed in the state. You can buy them, strangely enough, and we're trying to push for getting them through the license process. Once they're there, we think they will gain some awareness. And I find just the idea of using wood fibers as an insulator, if it can produce the R values and the installation is a big part of this as well. But that would be really cool to have another whole range of products. Right now we have, the fiberglass, the rock wool, sheep's wool, cotton, cellulose, spray foam, various rigid boards, just to name a few. And wood fiber would be kind of a switch, I think, from most of the products that are out there.
Yeah,
I
it's
think people can wrap their
interesting,
head around it being natural, et cetera.
It's interesting. When I first read about it, my first thought was, well, that's not a great idea for fire, but it's all rated and it's fire resistant.
Well, it all depends. Think about cellulose insulation. It's basically newspaper. You use that as kindling, to start a fire, but it doesn't burn when it's treated properly. So I don't know what they're doing yet. I haven't dug into it deeply enough. I've had some discussions with a local distributor and then also a contractor trying to use it here locally. And we need in our world, on my side of the regulatory world, I need certifications, burn tests, et cetera. I'm relying on them to go do those, and it takes a lot of cost and time to develop that documentation for any manufacturer. So I suspect we're going to see that over time.
Yeah,
if not already.
it's
Um,
interesting. I mean, the one that I've heard of is Timber HD. Is that pretty much what you're?
that's what I'm following. So there was rumblings of it, suddenly being out here, then it grew back. I think they're trying to get their themselves stable as to how they approach the market, and maybe it's even production of the product. I have not looked into it probably for 6 months now, waiting to hear more. I'm sure it's going to bubble up.
Yeah,
So,
interesting. Well, I mean that ties into the regulation, right? Like the last few years. I mean, fire and just the regulations changing fast here. So you guys as a company, you must struggle to stay out in front of that. Like, what are you doing in that regard?
so if fire, we're talking about the WUI requirements in our state, and probably going to be adopted, if not already, in other states, which make absolute sense, by the way. This is before the product burns. What do you do to prevent things from burning? One way to look at it. There's that side of the fire code. And then there's, things that are simple, like smoke development, flame development. And then there are timed assemblies. Okay. And this confuses people sometimes, but we've all heard the term 1 hour wall, 2 hour wall, or assembly. Those are burn tests. There's either prescriptive tables you can go to where they list these burn tests, or for a product like, let's say, the wood fiber, they will go and test do a specific test under certain parameters that meet the protocols, and do what's called a burn test, and get their product rated for certain applications. There are several out there doing that right now. I was on the phone this morning, and there is a foam product being burn tested for a specific hour assembly in walls that we haven't quite had yet. So that's coming along. So there's fire codes for WUI, and then there's these fire ratings for products by themselves, and then there are these timed assemblies. We got to talk about each of those separately.
Yeah.
All right. So, James, we're talking a little bit about WUI requirements and some of the testing that's involved with the insulation, this new wood fiber product. But I love your building science background. We just recently had you out at our project, and we just talked about some of the things that are in place on plans that we see often. And it's really refreshing to get a professional's take on the actual science of what goes on in our buildings. And we talked about an example that we have on our project where we had like a 15-inch overhang eave that was outside
Yeah.
the structure. And on our plans, and we see this all the time, where the architect calls for insulating that area, and they also call for it to be vented. And when you
Yeah.
came out, it was refreshing to hear your take on it that is backed by science. And that was to go unvented and uninsulated as long as it is separated from the living space. And it's just talk a little bit about that. I know architects are still being schooled by you, and it must be a fine line you have to walk to give
Well,
it.
it goes both ways. I mean, I'm see, Thursday, I actually go to an architect's office, and they're going to gather some other architects and builders, and we're going to have what I call a discussion. They think it's a lecture by me, but it's more of a discussion. And it goes both ways, because I learn a ton in these discussions as well. And to give everybody a break, the code is not written very clearly. That, if you were a layman and you picked up that code and tried to read it, it sounds like gobbledygook. We're in the trades. We've been doing this a long time. We read that code, and it's still difficult to decipher. I have the fortune to have talked to the author of the code we're talking about in this case, which is the unvetted roof assembly, which is R806.5, that anybody might even care to look up under the residential code. But in that code, it was written, we know the gentleman, Dr. Joseph G. Brick, who was the author of that part of the code, has adamantly said, look, you're not supposed to be insulating these eaves. By design, you have separated your interior spaces and the source of moisture from these eaves. These eaves are outside spaces, and therefore you're not to insulate it. Well, good luck going out and trying to explain that to the architects and the building officials when you have sitting over this the code that, I say he was the author, but it's very difficult to write these codes by committee. That is very hard to interpret. Now, if you back up and you go, okay, you were to spend a bunch of time, you and I could figure it out, right? That it takes a lot of time. Well, every time there's a new architect, you got to re-explain this, or a new project, or a new contractor. So it ends up being an endless cycle. I was on the phone this morning with somebody who's in an advocacy group right now, trying to get the codes clarified across all of the United States. And one of the things they're focusing on is this particular issue. And it's not as simple, well, why don't you just change the code? As I learned, what I've known, but was discussed this morning, is there's a lot of fingers in this pie here trying to both lobby and have their opinions. And you might say, well, it's totally logical. It doesn't matter. By the time you get to this committee level, it becomes a long drawn out process. So we will see probably clarity with respect to this overhanging eve issue in the future. In the meantime, we're going to constantly be explaining it.
Yeah,
It's interesting, like you and I would assume we've been in the industry I've been in for 30 years now, right? So you never see less code. You only see more pages. It would be nice, and I don't care that there's more pages, perhaps, but I think, like to your point, clearer language would go so far. And the question, I think, becomes, how do you take your meetings with architects and builders and distill that down and have that distillation hit the code?
I use my language, which tends to be very simple, blunt, and sometimes funny, to say what the code's trying to say, but use very simple terms, not even construction terms.
Yeah.
Like if you were to read the last line item on that code section, item 5.3, and it's about air sealing the bottom side of the rigid, it is the weirdest language you've ever seen. It's like nobody talks that way in the real world, and nobody talks that way in the construction world, yet this code is meant for construction. There isn't even a building official that talks that way. So you could take that same language and explain it to somebody in very simple terms. So that's one way to do this.
So
I don't know.
what I hear there is you've got a new job. You are now going to write the code for us. That's what I heard.
No,
Use the analogies. Pace, you're a big analogy guy. And James, I loved your analogy when we were talking about the eve, because we're contractors. We're just a bunch of dumb people for the most part sometimes. I don't know, right?
I wouldn't put it that way.
I'm joking, but
Yeah.
you did a great analogy where you said, look, if you can stick a straw into that space and blow air into it, and if it holds air, then you've got a problem. It can't breathe. But if you can blow a straw and air leaks out, as long as it has the same temperature and
Yeah, that gets into the technical side, and that was if you can build up vapor pressure, then you got a problem. If you have what was termed by the gentleman, Joe Stiebrick, who wrote this section, he called it vapor pressure equalization. If you have vapor pressure equalization, then you don't have a problem. If you tighten it up like a Ziploc bag, you could conceivably pump a little air in there and build up the pressure, and then you have a problem. I call that leakification. I think it's a simpler term.
Love it.
Okay. And it's more memorable than this. It's like the code calls, and in fact, this section of the code is a good one to kind of pick apart because it uses the term air permeable insulation and air impermeable insulation. And I defy you to use that in any conversation where you're trying to get a point across and not have somebody's eyes roll back up in their head more than 2 or 3 times. So I just use the terms when I discuss this. I'll boil it down to this: that air permeable, which is basically fiber insulations, any of the fiber insulations, and air impermeable is like spray foam or rigid board that's been hand air sealed. I call the fiber insulation fuzz and everything else bubbles. Bubbles is air impermeable, fuzz isn't. Now, if you take that same code and you transpose these words in there, bubbles and fuzz, the code suddenly starts to make sense and it's easier to follow along. I defy you to read that code section and not get dizzy in the first 2 sections. It's impossible.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a commonality in the code. If you were to flash forward, say 2 code iterations, 5, 6 years from now, whatever that is, like what do you expect to see? Like as far as
Really good question. What should we see? I don't know if it will go this way, but if 14 of the world and If many, and this isn't just me, if many people who are in the energy side of the world of how do we build energy efficient, comfortable homes, there is some basic stuff that has been skipped, overlooked, and purposefully lobbied out of our codes. And this is a really interesting one because it is not so sexy. There are not a lot of products that are being promoted to the industry. Well, probably shouldn't say that. There are not a lot of products that are very forward facing that are addressing this from corporations making millions on it. And that is very simply, how airtight do you get the home? How do you get it that airtight? Why do you get it that airtight? And what are the parameters for doing that? How tight should it be? And out of that, and of course, this is assuming you understand the premise for airtightness, which is there's no way to make an energy efficient home or comfortable home unless it's airtight to a certain degree. And we aren't building them tight enough. And if we can get past the old thinking of houses need to breathe, which is about as knuckle dragging as the industry was, and we move fast forward to where we are in the energy world, which is build tight, ventilate right, the code needs to give credit for doing that and also require it. And in our own state, one of the single biggest things that could have transformed how we build was lobbied out at the last minute in several cycles ago, and that was the requirement for blower door tests, or at least the credit for blower door tests. Whereas when you and I were talking, you guys mentioned that you were able to get a house down to 0.5 ACH, air changes per hour, which is pretty impressive. And I'm hearing that over and over again as we learn to concentrate on air tightness during the construction process, not after the fact. Hey, it's framed up. Now what do I do? Right? You do it as you go. And there's a little bit of herding cats with all your subs. We can build very nice, airtight enough homes and make dramatic differences in our energy use. Now, with that, of course, it's not so simple. There are a lot of other aspects that go with this. What mechanical systems have you designed that have been sized for that amount of air efficiency of your envelope? What indoor air quality systems have you built onto those mechanical systems to address air changes, or air quality, filtration and exchange, which is now mechanically done? And I find that there are probably, a small handful of builders in the Bay Area that are very, very aware of this. And certainly in the energy world, anybody who's into the energy efficiency of construction already knows this. It is like just basic 101 stuff. But if you go out and do what I do every day, you will find that everybody is learning it for the first time over and over and over again. I find that you could call it frustrating. I call it a challenge. It makes it fun, but you have to wonder, why are we so slow to understand something that is so simple and so basic and so obvious?
Yeah.
It's kind of the nature of our industry.
Yeah,
I mean, the thing that I hear when you say all that is like, there's education on our end as builders and designers, but another equally large obstacle is educating homeowners that we've been building cheap houses for 80 years, right? And
Cheap,
so,
fast, and leaky.
yep. And so changing that mentality of what value is and what your upfront expense is and how you save both in financial terms and in your health terms long term.
So it's interesting. So how do you address that? When you're one-on-one with a client and you have a little bit of time, it's not too hard to get the concept across. And I can go into that in a minute. There's a few things you can say, and there's some very logical ways of looking at it that when you frame it a certain way, they go, oh yeah, okay, I get it. But how does that translate into the industry as a whole or the consumer as a whole gathering that information? One of the stumbling blocks is that everybody knows the Pink Panther. It educated everybody from Owens Corning on what the fiberglass bat is, what our value is. Hey, insulation is good, right? Everybody knows that. I knew as a kid, we've all grown up with it. Every client I go into, no matter the age, they know who the Pink Panther is. But have they ever heard the word air sealing or how it's done in an attic? Like, go back to retrofit even, not even new construction or remodel. Nobody's heard of it for the most part. So that you got one of the simplest ways to save energy on the planet, period, Did you know that about 30% of the air on average leaks out through your ceiling? And, that's why you have vents in your roof, is because you leaked the air, but with it went moisture. So we can't have the moisture in the attic. So we got to poke more holes in the attic to let that air dilute. But in the process, we release even more of the energy paid to heat the air with, right? And where does the air come from to replace it? The crawl spaces, nasty places, cold places, windows, walls, etc. Well, that's moisture smart, energy dumb to build that way. And you can build fast and you don't have to think. That is the way we've been doing it. Now, if you think a little bit, and this is what I call high school level physics stuff. This is not even complicated physics or chemistry or anything. It is high school level stuff. But we bring it to our construction industry and suddenly everybody's arguing about it and nobody has a consensus. It's an interesting dilemma. The answers are pretty clear when you dig into it. When you finally get an individual or a group and you can point these things out, everybody gets it. But as an industry, we're not getting it. Maybe we're going to get there.
I think the headline here is James says, think a little bit.
Slow down and
that's the
think
headline.
as to why we've been doing things and put things in perspective. Don't just build because that's the way you did it. Hey, I'm just going to stick the furnace in. I put the building wrap on it. Isn't that an air barrier? You do hear that even today. Okay. And that I would call sort of a 1980s mentality. Sorry, I was in the 80s. I saw how we built then for the most part. And everybody uses that as sort of analogy in our, amongst ourselves in our industry. And here we are in 2025. Physics hasn't changed in 4.5 billion years. And finally, this industry is just starting to pay attention to high school level physics. It's fantastic, actually, when you think about it. And when you approach projects like this, one of my most fun things is to be on projects where this is the mantra from the beginning, and they haven't gone wild with exotic materials or exotic costs, and they are simply building one of my, you guys like analogies. Remember the race car analogy? We can build a race car. We can build a race car house. We can build a passive house. They're fantastic. They're phenomenal. They do what they are advertised to do. Sometimes that's out of somebody's ability cost-wise, but if you can get them around some of the basic principles is, hey, all we have to do is get this thing to, let's say, a noble target of 2 or 3 ACH. And then when we do that, we tell our HVAC guy, hey, don't make this thing a monster anymore because I'm blowing half my heat out into Mother Nature. I'm now going to keep my heat in. Ooh, the thing gets downsized. Magic, right? Now we bring in a little indoor air quality. We have some air exchanges with some mechanical systems. Notice I haven't even talked about insulation. We are already starting off on the right foot to an incredibly comfortable, energy efficient house. But think about our typical construction process. Everything I grew up with: build a foundation, throw up some walls, throw up some building wrap, throw some fuzzy stuff in the walls. And oh yeah, the HVAC I stick in this size. And we threw in some windows and we're drywalling. We haven't checked, air sealed. We haven't verified. We haven't done a blower door test. We haven't thought about any of that. That was our kind of our generic way of building. And we're trying to get away from that. Certainly the code wants us to get away from that. Certainly the Energy Commission. I mean, one of the things I've noticed, the Energy Commission is out here on what it's requiring, and everybody's actually here in what they're doing in reality. And there's this huge disconnect between what the code thinks everybody's doing and what we're actually doing. We're oftentimes not even building to the current energy code.
Yeah, I mean, this is why us as builders, we love to surround ourselves with people like you and your company SDI, right? I mean, when we did that job where we did some blower door tests before and after on a remodel, and we blew a 0.5. I mean, that was because we had professionals like you on the job site to help us with that air sealing on and the insulation factor of the home. I mean, from our standpoint as builders, Pace and I are always learning, and that's part of why we love what we do. And understanding how to deal with the exterior of the home and do things with the sheathing products that we have now, and taping and caulking and all that stuff. It's pretty straightforward stuff. But bringing people like you in to really bring it to the next level is really important to us. And I mean, that brings us to, jobs that you've seen. You've seen so many jobs over your lifetime. Is there, insulation it never gets seen, right? We cover everything up and it's such an important aspect. and there's so much that goes into it. Is there a recent project or design that really made
Adam,
you happy and put a smile on your face that you saw and have been a part of recently?
We become so numb to doing interesting, fancy projects that, what excites me? The most exciting thing for me is to take a normal vanilla approach to a project and turn it into this. A sleeper is like in the hot rod industry, a car that just doesn't look like it's that fancy, but it just rockets like crazy, handles like crazy. It doesn't have any bling or fancy stuff on it. It didn't get any awards, but it just it just does fantastic. I like sleeper projects, sleeper homes. Take a normal project, big or small, do some of the stuff we just talked about and turn it into what people tell me afterwards. They say, "Oh my God, I never knew homes could be this comfortable. I don't know what you did. I don't know how this happened." And I hear this all the time. Is my favorite thing is I didn't realize homes could be so incredibly comfortable. And they think, did you put like R1000 in the roof? What did you do? And it's exactly what I just talked about before. It's some pretty basic approaches to energy efficiency and comfort.
Yeah. You did use the word disconnect at one point when you were talking. And that's really the point of this podcast, our Build Connected podcast. And it's really about continuity for us and bringing everything together, bringing in the right people. And we want to thank you for coming on our podcast. You've shed so much light. I feel like we could just keep going on and on. There's so many different things I want to dive into, and I have so many questions. And good thing I have your number. You'll be hearing from
Yeah.
us
Keep poking me. I keep
in the
talking.
future. But but anyway, just really want to thank you for coming on, James. Appreciate it.
Fun, guys. A lot of fun.
thanks for joining us on another episode of Build Connected. I'm Pace.
And I'm Adam.
And I'm James.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on Build Connected. For more stories, insights, and ideas, visit diamondhomerestoration.com or find us on Instagram and LinkedIn. We'll be back next week. We hope you will too.